I pulled into the driveway, letting the engine hum in the darkness for a moment. It was late again. 12-hour shifts had become my norm, but I never complained. That's what a man does, right? Puts his head down, works hard, and makes sure his family has everything they need. I rubbed my face, exhausted. My back ached, my hands were calloused, and my stomach was empty, but at least I was home. I imagined stepping inside, seeing my wife, maybe stealing a quiet moment together before crashing into bed. But before I could even open the car door, I saw it. A shadow moved behind the curtains of the living room window. Not just one. Two. My fingers froze over the handle. My first thought was Ethan. Maybe he was up late playing video games? But no, these figures were tall. I killed the engine and stepped out quietly, moving toward the house. The front door was unlocked. Strange. I pushed it open just enough to hear laughter. Low, hushed, and intimate. A man's laugh. Deep. Confident. Too comfortable in my house. Then, a voice I knew too well. Oh, stop. He won't be home for hours. Something inside me snapped. I stepped in. Hard. The door slammed against the wall, and the laughter cut off instantly. The living room light was dim, but I saw them clearly. My wife, standing by the couch, wearing one of my shirts. The one she always said was too baggy on me, but somehow fit her perfectly. She was barefoot, her hair a little messy, like someone had been running their hands through it. And the man sitting next to her, built like a goddamn statue, muscles popping out of his tight t-shirt like he was auditioning for a bodybuilding competition. He didn't even flinch when I walked in, just sat there smirking. My wife's face drained of color. Then, as if flipping a switch, she rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. You're home early, she said, crossing her arms. Like I was the problem. I couldn't speak. My blood roared in my ears. Every ounce of exhaustion burned away, replaced by something I couldn't even describe. The bodybuilder leaned back, stretching his arms like he had all the time in the world. You should have called first, man, he said, flashing a grin. I took a step forward, hands shaking, heart hammering. Who the hell are you? He chuckled. Does it matter? Then he turned to my wife, and smirked. You said he was cool. She sighed, irritated, like I was some annoying guest ruining her fun. Mark, don't be dramatic. This isn't what you think. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Oh, really? Then what is it? She hesitated. Just for a second. That's all I needed. You're overreacting, she finally said. Maybe if you weren't always at work, we wouldn't need. I don't know what pissed me off more. The fact that she was blaming me, or the fact that she didn't even try to hide it anymore. You wouldn't need what, exactly? My voice was deathly quiet. Her lips parted. But before she could answer, he stood up. He was big. Bigger than me. Towering, even. He cracked his knuckles like he'd been waiting for this moment. Then, with the most disrespectful smirk I've ever seen, he said, Be a good boy and run before I hurt you. Silence. Then, as if he wanted to drive the point home, he flexed. Flexed. Like we were in some high school testosterone contest, except this wasn't a game. I clenched my fists, but before I could do anything, he took a step closer. Leave now, he said, tilting his head. Or in an ambulance. I breathed in slowly, locking eyes with him. Then, without hesitation, I said, I overheard my son talking to his friend. A flicker of confusion crossed my wife's face. I didn't break eye contact with the bodybuilder. Bro, your mom's bold. Bringing her lover over while your dad's working. I quoted. Her face froze. But I wasn't done. I smirked. And you know what my son said? I turned to her, watching the color drain from her cheeks. He smirked and said, The fool works double shifts to provide for us while mom has fun with her boyfriends. Dead. Silence. Her mouth open, then shut. For once in her miserable, lying life, she had nothing to say. By morning, the accounts were empty. The house? Gone. And that's when they finally realized who the real fool was. By the time the sun rose, they had nothing. I didn't sleep. How could I? I spent the night making moves, moving pieces they didn't even know existed. The whole time, I imagined their faces when they realized what I'd done. And damn, did it feel good. Let's rewind a bit. After that little showdown in my living room, I didn't storm out. That's what they wanted. My wife, no, this woman, wanted me to leave, tail between my legs, while she laughed about it with her muscle-headed boyfriend. Not happening. I stayed. I sat down in my chair like I owned the place, because I did. I grabbed the remote, turned on the TV, and acted like they didn't exist. Dude, what the hell are you doing? The gym rat finally snapped. I didn't even look at him. Watching TV? My wife's voice was sharp. Mark, stop acting crazy. Just leave and we can talk later. I let out a small laugh. Talk? You mean where you gaslight me into thinking this is somehow my fault? Nah, I'm good. Her face twisted into a snarl, but before she could start with her usual bulls, I pulled out my phone. One tap. That's all it took. All our joint accounts frozen. Her credit cards? Declined. The house? Well, it was never in her name to begin with. See, she thought she was smart. Thought she could live a double life while I was too busy working my ass off to notice. But what she forgot? I was smarter. I looked over at her just in time to see her phone buzz. Confused, she grabbed it and then her eyes went wide. What the hell is this? She hissed. I turned up the TV volume. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. The boyfriend, who up until now had been flexing his way through life, was starting to catch on. Babe? He asked, glancing between us. What's wrong? I almost laughed. He called her babe, like they were in some cheap romance novel and not about to get their lives wrecked. I stood up, stretching like I had all the time in the world. You know what's crazy? I mused, looking at my watch. It should be happening right about. Bang, bang, bang. 3 loud knocks at the door. She jumped. He flinched. I smiled. Right on time. I strolled to the door and swung it open, revealing 2 men in suits. Professionals. My guys. Mr. Reynolds? One of them asked. That's me, I said easily. The other one handed me a clipboard. The transfer is complete. The house is now on the market. I nodded, taking the pen and signing with a flourish. Then, I turned to my soon-to-be ex-wife and her wannabe action hero and said, Oh, did I forget to mention? This isn't your house anymore. Silence. Then chaos. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Mark, what the hell did you do? I shook her off easily. Correction, what did you do? Because the moment you started screwing around behind my back, you lost every right to anything tied to my name. She whirled on the men in suits. You can't do this. I live here. One of them shrugged. Ma'am, according to the documents, you're just a guest. Her face turned red, whether from anger or humiliation, I didn't care. The boyfriend, up until now too stupid to understand, finally spoke up. Bro, you can't just. I turned on him so fast that he actually stepped back. I don't know what's funnier, I said, tilting my head. The fact that you thought you could intimidate me? Or the fact that you're about to be homeless with her? His jaw clenched. You're making a big mistake. I smiled. No. I just corrected one. Her eyes blazed. You can't do this to your family. Family? I let out a cold laugh. That's rich coming from you. You know what I overheard my son say? Her lips pressed together. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough to make it sting. The fool works double shifts to provide for us while mom has fun with her boyfriends. Her breath hitched. I didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. The damage was done. I walked past them, out the front door, down the steps, never looking back. Because the best part? By the time they realized what had happened, by the time they checked the accounts, saw the empty balances, and figured out the house was already being sold out from under them, I was already gone. I didn't look back. Not once. I got in my car, shut the door, and just sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel. My heart was still hammering, but not from anger anymore. Adrenaline. The kind you get after doing something that can't be undone. Through the windshield, I saw them. Her. Still standing in the doorway, her face twisted in shock and rage. Her hands clenched into fists like she wanted to rip me apart. But couldn't, because she had lost. Him. The muscle-brained idiot staring at me like he was debating whether to chase after me and throw a punch. But he wouldn't, because men like him, they only fight when they know they can win. I rolled down the window, just a little, just enough to say one last thing. You have 1 hour to get your stuff out before the realtor changes the locks. I didn't wait for a response. Didn't care what they had to say. I hit the gas and peeled out of there, leaving everything behind, except my money, my house, and my dignity. But I wasn't done, because there was still one more thing I had to take care of. I pulled up outside Ethan's school just as the last bell rang. Kids poured out, laughing, shoving, yelling. It took me a second, but then I saw him, my son. He was walking with his friend, the same one I had overheard talking about my wife's little extracurricular activities. I parked, got out, and leaned against the car, waiting. When he spotted me, his face went from surprise to concerned in seconds. "Dad?" His friend's eyes widened and the kid practically sprinted in the opposite direction. Ethan stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, trying to act casual, but I could see it. The hesitation. The guilt. He knew. I motioned to the passenger seat. "Get in." He hesitated. "Mom's, she's not home." That was all I said, and that was all it took. Ethan climbed into the car, and we drove off. Silence. A few blocks later, I finally spoke. "How long?" His head snapped up. "What?" I kept my eyes on the road. "How long have you known?" Silence again. But this time it was heavy. Ethan swallowed. "A while." I gripped the wheel. "And you never told me?" He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know how." I took a slow breath. "So instead, you joked about it with your friends?" His face flushed. "It wasn't like that." I laughed. "Short. Bitter." "Really?" "Because I heard you. Word for word." He shrunk in his seat. "Dad, I pulled into a parking lot and cut the engine." Turned to him fully. "Be honest with me, Ethan. Do you even respect me?" His head snapped up. "What? Of course I do." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look that way. It looks like you watched your mom bring random guys into my house, let them sleep in my bed, and instead of telling me, you laughed about it." He flinched. I saw his hands curl into fists in his lap, like he wanted to hit something. "I didn't think you'd do anything," he muttered. I blinked. "Excuse me?" His jaw tightened. "I mean, you were always working. You never noticed." I stared at him, trying to wrap my head around the words. I never noticed? I was out there, busting my ass, taking extra shifts, making sure this kid had everything he needed, and he thought that meant I didn't care? I let out a slow breath. Ethan listened to me carefully. He didn't look at me, but I kept going. "I left. She has nothing now. No money, no house, nothing." His head snapped up. "Wait, what?" I nodded. "She played her game, and I played mine." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked out the window, processing, and for the first time in this whole mess, I saw something new in his eyes. Respect. He nodded. Just once. "So where are we going now?" I started the car. "Wherever the hell we want." We drove in silence for a while. Ethan was staring out the window, his mind clearly racing, but I didn't push him. Let him sit with it. Let him think about everything he just learned, because reality had finally hit him. His mom wasn't untouchable. She wasn't the one in control. And for the first time in God knows how long, he was looking at me differently. Not as the fool who worked himself into the ground. Not as the guy too busy to notice what was happening in his own house. But as the man who just burned her empire to the ground. I could feel it in the way he kept sneaking glances at me, as if trying to figure out who the hell I really was. Good. Let him wonder. "Dad," he finally said. "Yeah. Where are we really going?" I smirked. "You hungry?" His eyebrows shot up. Yeah." I turned the wheel, taking the next exit. "Then we're getting steaks." 30 minutes later, we were sitting in a nice restaurant. One of those old-school steak places where the waiters wear vests, the booths are deep leather, and the steaks come thick and bloody. Ethan was wide-eyed. We don't usually eat at places like this." I picked up the menu, scanning the options. "Well, Ethan, usually your mom was busy spending my money on her boyfriends." His face burned red. I didn't say it to humiliate him. I said it because it was true. The truth was going to be real uncomfortable for a while, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat a damn thing. The waiter came by, looking between us. "What can I get you too?" Ethan hesitated. I saw him instinctively looking for the cheapest thing on the menu. That was how Jessica trained him to think about what she wanted first. "Ribeye," I said, shutting the menu. "Biggest one you've got." Ethan blinked. I looked at him expectantly. "Well, same," he said quickly, handing the menu back. The waiter nodded. "And to drink?" "2 Cokes," I said. Ethan let out a breathless laugh. "Mom would lose it if she knew I was drinking soda." "Yeah?" I smirked. "Well, guess what?" "What?" "She doesn't have a say anymore." And damn if that didn't hit him like a truck. I saw it click in his head like a switch flipping. He leaned back, shaking his head with a grin he didn't even realize he had. "Man, this is crazy." I took a sip of water, raising an eyebrow. "What part?" "All of it." He exhaled sharply. "You really left her with nothing?" "Every cent." His grin widened. "And she didn't see it coming?" I let out a chuckle. "Ethan, your mother thought I was the kind of man who would roll over and take it. She thought I'd beg, cry, fight for her while she stood there laughing with her new toy." Ethan frowned. "That guy, the one at the house, what about him?" He hesitated. "I've seen him before." I set down my glass. "Where?" "Couple times," Ethan admitted. "Picked Mom up from the gym once. Thought he was her trainer or something." I laughed. Hard. "Yeah. I bet he was training her real well." Ethan grimaced. "Okay, yeah, don't say it like that." I smirked. "Then don't lie to me again." His face fell. He looked down at his lap, fidgeting with his hands. "I didn't mean to." I held up a hand. "It's done. What matters now is what comes next." He nodded slowly. "So, what does come next?" I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "First, we're staying in a hotel for a few nights. Then," I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Then we find a place. A new house. A fresh start. Just me and you." He blinked. "No, Mom." I stared at him, letting the weight of the words settle. "Ethan." She made her choice. He swallowed hard. I could tell it was hitting him differently now. The reality of it. The permanence. "She's not gonna take this well," he muttered. "No," I agreed. "She's not. She's gonna call you. Blow up your phone. Show up screaming. Probably." His face was tense. "What are you gonna do?" I smiled. "Nothing." Ethan stared at me. "I've got nothing to say to her," I explained simply. "And there's nothing she can do. No money. No house. No power." I leaned back in my chair. "Let her scream." He absorbed that for a long moment. Then, something unexpected happened. Ethan smiled. Not awkward. Not nervous. Proud. Like, for the first time in his life, he finally saw his dad as someone who wasn't just a provider, but as a man who stood his ground and won. "You're kinda badass," he admitted. I chuckled. "Took you this long to figure that out?" He grinned. The steaks arrived, thick and steaming. The waiter set them down and we dug in. No more heavy conversations. No more thinking about her. Just me and my son. Moving forward, the hotel room was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan had passed out an hour ago, sprawled across the bed like he didn't have a care in the world. And maybe for the first time in weeks he didn't. Me? I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen. 27 missed calls, Jessica. 14 new voicemails, Jessica. 9 unread messages, Jessica. And then at the very bottom, 1 text from an unknown number. You don't know who you just messed with. I smiled. So Jim Boy finally found my number. Cute. I leaned back, tossing my phone onto the nightstand. Let them call. Let them scream into the void. I wasn't answering. Instead, I grabbed the remote, turned on the TV, and flicked through the channels mindlessly. My body was exhausted, but my brain? Wide awake. Because the real war hadn't even started yet. Jessica wasn't going to take this lying down. No money. No house. No credit. She'd lost everything except the ability to make my life a living hell. And I knew exactly how she'd try. Ethan. She was going to use him against me. I felt it in my bones. I woke up to pounding on the hotel door. Loud. Relentless. Desperate. Ethan jolted awake, rubbing his eyes groggily. What the more banging? Then her voice. Mark, open this door. I sighed. Right on schedule. I got up, stretching lazily. Ethan was sitting up now, blinking in confusion. Is that? Yep. More pounding. I know you're in there. I ran a hand down my face. So dramatic. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Are you gonna open it? I raised an eyebrow. Do I look stupid? He snorted. No, but she sounds like she's about to break the door down. I walked over, leaned against the door, and spoke loud and clear. Hotel security is watching the cameras, Jessica. You want them to throw you out? Dead silence. Then, a quiet, seething voice. Mark, just talk to me. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Talk? You mean the part where you explain how this is all my fault? How I overreacted? How if I were just a better husband, you wouldn't have to sleep around? Nothing. She hated when I was 10 steps ahead of her. I continued. Or maybe you want to talk about how you let our son watch while you brought men into our home? A pause. Then, in the fakest, most fragile voice I'd ever heard, she whispered, Mark, please. I rolled my eyes. There it was. The switch. She had 2 settings. Rage-filled lunatic when she thought she could bully me into submission. Weeping victim when she realized she couldn't. Ethan was watching me carefully, listening, and I knew this was a test. How I handled this moment would shape how he saw me forever. So I made my decision. I unlocked the door, but didn't open it. A second later, she shoved it open herself, stumbling in. Jesus, Mark, finally I stepped forward, blocking her path. She froze. I let the silence stretch, my expression cold. Unmoving. No words. No emotion. She looked up at me, searching for something, a crack, a weakness. She found nothing. Her lips trembled. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. You have 30 seconds. That rattled her. She blinked, clearly thrown off. I just 25. Her eyes flashed. God, Mark, would you stop being a child? 20. Her face twisted in rage. You can't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. I tilted my head. You mean your boyfriend didn't let you crash at his place? Silence. Then the most telling reaction of all. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes flickered. And that's when I knew. I smirked. He left you, didn't he? She sucked in a sharp breath. That's none of your business. Wow, I chuckled, shaking my head. What, he wasn't ready to be a stepdad? Her hands fisted at her sides. You son of a, she stopped herself. Looked over at Ethan. Realized she was losing in front of him. She took a deep breath, smoothing her hair back, switching tactics again. Mark, I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? She swallowed. All of them. I waited. And then she did exactly what I knew she would. She turned to Ethan, softening her expression into the perfect picture of motherly love. Baby, she said gently. Come here. He didn't move. Her smile twitched. Honey, come on. Let's go home. Ethan looked at me. I didn't say a word, because this was his moment, his choice. He turned back to her, exhaling slowly. Where's home, Mom? Her eyes flickered. What? The house is gone, he said, voice firm. You have no money, no car, no apartment. Where's home? Her mouth opened, then shut. For the first time, she had no answer. Ethan nodded, stepping closer to me. Jessica cracked. Her whole body tensed, breathing sharp and erratic, fingers twitching like she wanted to rip something apart. Then she said the last words she'd ever say to me. With pure venom, she spat, "You'll regret this." I smiled. Already don't. Then, without another word, I shut the door in her face. And this time, I didn't look back. Ethan stood there, staring at the door. Jessica's last words still hung in the air like a bad smell. You'll regret this. I waited, giving him a second to process. He didn't say anything. Just exhaled slowly and turned toward me. That was insane. I smirked. Welcome to the real world, kid. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. I mean, I knew she'd freak out, but she's got nothing left, I said simply. Of course she freaked out. His face twisted like he didn't know how to feel. Where do you think she's gonna go? I shrugged. Not my problem. That answer didn't satisfy him. I could tell. His whole life, he'd known his mom one way, the center of everything. The one who pulled the strings. Manipulated. controlled. Now, for the first time, she was powerless. It was shaking him. She'll figure something out, he muttered, more to himself than me. Probably. He let out a breath, still processing. Then, a second later, his phone buzzed. Jessica. He stared at the screen. Didn't answer. Let it ring out. Then, finally, he looked up at me. So, what now? I checked my watch. We go house hunting. His eyebrows shot up. Already? I grabbed my keys. No time to waste. An hour later, we were sitting in a realtor's office. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s. All business, with a no-nonsense attitude I could respect. She scanned the paperwork, clicking her pen. You're looking to buy immediately? She asked. Cash, I said. No loans. No waiting. Ethan's head snapped toward me. Wait, cash? I smirked. Told you I was prepared. The realtor raised an eyebrow. You don't hear that often. Most people get mortgages. Not interested. She nodded, setting the papers aside. All right. What are you looking for? I glanced at Ethan. You got preferences? He blinked. Something with a big TV? The realtor left. Well, that's not usually listed in the home specs, but I'll see what I can do. I leaned forward. Quiet neighborhood. Space. Privacy. No unnecessary neighbors. She tapped her pen. How soon do you want to move in? I grinned. Tomorrow. Her eyes widened slightly. That fast? Like I said, I replied smoothly, I'm paying cash. She considered me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, Mr. Reynolds. Let's find you a house. By the time we got back to the hotel that night, Ethan was buzzing. This place is sick, he kept saying. Like we actually own it? Just like that. I chuckled, tossing my jacket onto a chair. Yep. No paperwork? Handled. No waiting? Keys are in my pocket. He whistled, shaking his head. Damn. I stretched, cracking my neck. You ready to pack up? His smile faltered. What's there to pack? I stopped. That hit different. Because he was right. We didn't have anything. Jessica had controlled everything. Our home, our furniture, even the stupid dishes. We walked out with nothing but the clothes on our backs. Ethan's whole life had been ripped away overnight. And it finally hit him. He sat on the bed, rubbing his face. It's so weird, he muttered. Waking up yesterday, I had a house, a room, stuff. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Now I don't even have a toothbrush. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I grabbed my keys. Get in the car. He looked up. Where are we going? I grinned. Shopping. We cleared out the store. New clothes, new shoes, new gadgets. A massive TV because, yes, Ethan got his way on that one. When we got to the checkout, Ethan hesitated. Are you sure? I met his eyes. Ethan, we're building a new life. You don't bring old baggage into a new life. He took that in. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. Okay, he said. New life. And just like that, we left the store not as the people we were yesterday, but as who we were about to become. We pulled into the driveway of our new home, and for the first time in days, I felt something settle deep inside me. Relief. Not the fake kind. Not the I survived another day in that hellhole kind. Real relief. Ethan stepped out of the car, staring up at the house like it was some kind of mirage. We really own this? I smirked, jingling the keys. Unless you see anyone else living here. He let out a breath and grinned. Damn. I chuckled, unlocking the door and pushing it open. The air inside was clean, not just physically, but mentally. No bad memories. No betrayals. No ghosts of some idiot bodybuilder flexing in my living room. Just a fresh start. Ethan wandered in, taking it all in. Dude, this is way bigger than our old house. That's because I bought it for us, not for your mom's wine parties. He snorted. Yeah, guess we don't need an entire room just for meditation and girl talk. I grinned. Nope. But we do need one for the new TV. His eyes lit up. Hell yeah. I tossed him a box. Start unpacking. Your room's upstairs. Pick whichever one you want. He took off like a shot. And for the first time in forever, I stood in my own house, closed my eyes, and just breathed. No more waiting for the next disaster. No more feeling like a guest in my own home. This was ours. I was halfway through setting up the living room when Ethan came back down, holding something in his hands. A photo. He hesitated, then handed it to me. It was old, from a time when I still thought Jessica was the love of my life. Me, her, and Ethan at the beach, all smiles. A different life. A lie. I looked at Ethan. You want to keep this? He frowned. I dunno. Feels weird. I studied the picture for a second. Then, without a word, I grabbed the trash can and dropped it in. Ethan blinked. I dusted off my hands. Problem solved? He let out a breathless laugh. Damn, you really don't care anymore. I met his eyes. Ethan, your mom was a chapter. Not the whole book. He nodded slowly, like he was really letting that sink in. Then he grinned. Want to go buy some dumb decorations? I laughed. Yeah. Let's go. That night, after hours of buying useless but fun crap, ordering too much pizza, and setting up the biggest TV I've ever owned, I finally sat down with a beer, watching Ethan flip through channels like we weren't homeless 24 hours ago. I had one. I had my son. My house. My life back. But I also knew one thing for sure. Jessica wasn't done. She wasn't the type to accept defeat. And something told me she'd come back with one last move. I was ready. The calm didn't last. It never does when you're dealing with someone like her. The next morning, I was up early, sipping coffee on the back porch, watching the sun rise over my new home. The air was crisp, clean, untouched by the stench of betrayal. I had a whole plan mapped out. Job adjustments, new routines, everything set up so Ethan and I could move forward without her. Then my phone rang. Blocked number. I let it ring out. Then Ethan's phone started ringing. He walked into the kitchen, still half asleep, checking the caller ID. Mom. He gave me a look. Should I answer? I exhaled slowly. Your choice. He hesitated for half a second, then hit decline. Good. I patted his shoulder and slid him a plate of pancakes. Eat up. First day of the new life. But Jessica? She wasn't done. I should have seen it coming. When people like her lose power, they don't just accept it. They get creative. So when I got a call later that afternoon, from an unknown number, I answered without thinking. And the moment I heard the voice on the other end, I knew. It wasn't Jessica. It was her lawyer. Mr. Reynolds, the voice said smoothly. This is Jonathan Harris. I represent your wife. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temple. Ex-wife. He chuckled. Not officially. I sighed. Let me guess. She's trying to squeeze money out of me? No, he said. And there was something in his tone that made my stomach tighten. She's filing for emergency custody of Ethan. Everything stopped. Come again. Full custody, he repeated. She's claiming you're unstable, that you made a reckless financial decision, left her homeless, and that you're emotionally damaging your son. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, that's rich. Mr. Reynolds, the lawyer said, his voice smooth as glass. If you don't comply, we'll be seeing you in court. I grinned. Then I hope you have a damn good suit, because I'll bury you in that courtroom. Silence. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. I set my phone down, took a breath. Then I stood up. Ethan, who had been listening from the couch, looked over with wide eyes. She's serious? I nodded, rolling my shoulders. Looks like it. His jaw clenched. She's not gonna win, right? I met his eyes. Steady. Unshaken. No, she's not. Because this time, I was ready for war. The next few days were a waiting game. Jessica didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. But I wasn't stupid. She wasn't gone. She was plotting. So I did what I always do. I stayed ahead. First, I got a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one that specialized in destroying people like her. The kind of guy that made judges roll their eyes when they saw him because they already knew he never lost. Second, I started gathering everything. Screenshots, bank records, camera footage. I pulled up every transaction Jessica had ever made with our joint account and highlighted every suspicious charge. Hotel stays, fancy dinners while I was working double shifts, jewelry I never saw. And the kicker? One $2,000 cash withdrawal from the day before I found out about her affair. She was planning to run. She thought she'd drain me dry and start over with Jim Boy or whoever else was next in her lineup. Too bad she lost the game before it even started. Ethan saw me working late one night, piles of paperwork stacked next to me. He pulled up a chair, frowning at the files. "What is all this?" I smirked. "Proof." His eyebrows furrowed. "Proof of what?" I turned the page, pointing at one specific charge. That your mom was committing financial infidelity before she was committing the other kind. His mouth opened. Then shut. Then opened again. "That's the thing." "Oh yeah." I leaned back. Judges don't like it when one parent is blowing through family money for their own fun, while the other parent is busting their ass to provide. He exhaled. "Jesus." I closed the folder and met his eyes. "Ethan, you need to understand something." He straightened. "What?" I rested my arms on the table. "Serious. Unshaken. She doesn't care about what's best for you. If she did, she wouldn't be doing this. This isn't about custody. This is about control." He swallowed. I let that sit for a second before continuing. "But she made one fatal mistake." "What?" I grinned. "She underestimated me." Court day. Jessica walked in like she was stepping onto a stage. Dressed in white. Hair perfect. Fake sadness on her face. Like she was some heartbroken victim. I didn't react. Didn't blink. Didn't acknowledge her. Just sat there with my lawyer. Calm as a storm waiting to hit. She took the stand first, and oh, did she put on a show. Tears. Trembling voice. "Your Honor, I'm just so concerned. My ex-husband made such rash decisions. He threw me out on the street, drained our accounts, uprooted our son's life. I'm worried he's unstable. That Ethan isn't in a safe environment." I watched the judge. Unmoved. Good. Then it was my turn. I walked up, handed over everything. Receipts. Transactions. Screenshots. A whole damn novel of her behavior. Then my lawyer pulled out the final blow. A witness statement. From Ethan. Jessica's face went white. Ethan stood up, walked to the front, sat down, and then, in the clearest voice I'd ever heard from him, he looked the judge in the eye and said, "I want to stay with my dad." Jessica froze. The courtroom fell silent. The judge turned to her. "Ma'am, it seems your son is more than capable of making his own decision." She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in her life, she had no control. The judge ruled in my favor. Full custody. Jessica got nothing. Not a dime. Not a weekend. Not a shred of the life she tried to control. She lost. And as I walked out of that courtroom, my son at my side, I didn't even bother looking at her. Because she was no longer our problem, the moment we stepped out of that courtroom, it was over. Not just the case. Not just the fight. Her. Jessica was done. She had no money. No home. No power. No custody. And the best part? She did it to herself. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to rub it in. The look on her face. The pure, staggering realization that she had lost everything. Was enough. She tried to play a game she couldn't win. And I made sure she never played again. Ethan and I walked through the parking lot. The weight of years finally lifting off my shoulders. "You okay?" I asked. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah." A pause. Then, with a small, almost disbelieving laugh, he said, "I mean, it's really over, huh?" I grinned. "Yeah, kid. It is." He looked up at me, not as a boy looking at his father, but as a young man who had finally seen what it meant to stand your ground and win. He nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. "So what now?" I thought about that for a second. Then, without a word, I tossed him the car keys. His eyes went wide. "Wait, are you serious?" I smirked. "You wanted to start driving, right?" He lit up, scrambling to catch the keys. "Hell yeah." I clapped him on the back. "Then let's go home." The drive back was different. Lighter. Free. The kind of drive where you roll the windows down, turn the music up, and just exist. And as I sat in the passenger seat, watching my son, take control of the wheel for the first time, I realized something. For years I had been running on autopilot. Working. Providing. Moving forward because I had to. But now? I wasn't just moving forward. I was finally living. And Jessica? She was just a chapter in a book that I had already closed.